Mike Wallace was sitting in his pickup truck on an Arkansas country road when a neighbor pulled up beside him. Seconds later, Wallace was murdered. He wasn't killed over land or money, but over a herbicide. For generations, farming relied on a cycle of saving. You harvested your crop and kept a portion of the seeds to plant again the following year, a practice that kept the food supply decentralized. Today, that cycle has been replaced by a system where more than 80 these chemicals allowed farmers to till broad-leafed weeds by spraying their fields, leaving the crops themselves untouched. But inside Monsanto's factory in Nitro, West Virginia, the production process was creating a toxic byproduct called dioxin. Workers began to fall ill, and their skin would erupt with painful lesions and acne. Monsanto continued production, eventually becoming the largest supplier of these same chemicals for the military to use as Agent Orange during the Vietnam War. Internal records show that Monsanto knew dioxin was one of the most toxic compounds they had ever encountered. However, they did not warn the public or the government, choosing instead to protect the profitability of the herbicide. By the 1970s, as the dangers of dioxin became public knowledge, Monsanto moved to release a new, more lucrative invention: glyphosate, marketed as Roundup. This era established a pattern for the company. They prioritized market success even when internal evidence pointed towards significant human damage. Roundup targets a specific biological chain in plants called the shikimate pathway. By blocking a key enzyme, glyphosate prevents the plant from creating the amino acids it needs to live, effectively starving it. The problem was that the shikimate pathway exists in almost all plants. While Roundup killed the weeds, it also killed the crops the farmers were trying to grow. To fix this, Monsanto launched an internal Manhattan Project to find a biological workaround. Researchers began testing the soil and sludge ponds outside their own chemical factories, looking for anything that could survive their own product. They discovered a strain of salmonella thriving in the waste. It had evolved a mutated version of the enzyme that allowed it to survive even in high concentrations of glyphosate. Scientists isolated the DNA from that bacteria and used a gene gun to load it onto gold particles. They fired it into the plant cells at 1,400 kilometers per hour, integrating the immune gene into the plant's own chromosomes. The result was the Roundup Ready seed. Farmers could now spray their entire fields with weed killer, while the genetically modified crops survived. By making the seed immune to their own chemical, Monsanto created a biological dependency that made their products the only viable choice for many farmers. To protect this system, Monsanto ensured farmers could not actually own the seeds. They had to sign technology use agreements that legally prohibited them from saving seeds for the next year. The company enforced these contracts by hiring private investigators and using helicopter surveillance to find signs of infringement. They launched hundreds of lawsuits against farmers, often seeking settlements that could exceed $20 million. They even set up a hotline, 1-800-ROUNDUP, encouraging farmers to snitch on their neighbors if they suspected them of replanting seeds illegally. This created a trap for those outside the system. If a neighbor sprays Roundup and the chemical drifts across the property line, it kills any crop not engineered to survive it, leaving farmers with little choice but to buy into the monopoly just to stay in business. Monsanto used patent law to turn the communal tradition of farming into a high-stakes legal environment monitored by corporate investigators. For decades, Monsanto maintained that Roundup was safe for humans and pets, frequently marketing it as being safer than table salt. In 2015, a panel under the World Health Organization officially classified glyphosate as a probable human carcinogen, linking it to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. This finding triggered a massive global backlash and thousands of lawsuits from cancer patients who had used Roundup for years. During legal discovery, internal documents known as the Monsanto Papers were released. They proved that Monsanto executives would ghostwrite foundational studies that claimed the chemical was safe, then pay academics to sign their names to them. The papers also showed that Monsanto colluded with officials inside the EPA to try and stop opposing research and influence safety classifications. The global consensus that glyphosate was safe appears to have been a manufactured illusion rather than an independent scientific truth. With over 11,000 lawsuits pending, Monsanto sold itself to the German chemical company Bayer. While Monsanto's executives cashed out, Bayer was left to pay over $10 billion in settlements to cancer victims. Despite these billions of dollars in genetic engineering, nature adapted. Today, more than 60 species of weeds have evolved their own resistance to Roundup, making the herbicide less effective every year. When we allow a single corporation to patent our food supply and regulate its own safety data, the result is a system that compromises science, divides communities, and eventually fails to even control the weeds.